Okay. Thank you all for attending this evening. Should I go to graduate school? Um, this is going to be a session that's going to help you, I guess, solicit questions from, or think of questions that you might want to ask, but also um, we've kind of done a little bit of the work for you beforehand. And I've got Dr. Carla McCain, professor of chemistry, Dr. Mickey Mohammed, who is professor of public health, right? No,
Economics.
economics. That's right. I'm sorry. And then Mindy Landick, who is a professor of
East Asian Studies.
East Asian Studies. I wanted to say Chinese, but
Japanese.
Yeah, Chinese. But anyway, so these professors are here to help me with this session, and we're gonna talk about all the things that you should consider when you're thinking about going to graduate school, questions to ask, um, everything. So some of you here on the session are probably thinking, um, I want to go to graduate school. I'm not entirely sure what kind of program I need to go into or what even is graduate school. How is it different from undergraduate programs? And so let's talk a little bit about how it's different. Austin College really prepares students for graduate study. Although not all of our graduates go directly into graduate school when they graduate. I think the latest probably metric is about 43% of a graduating class will go directly into graduate school when they graduate. But over a 5-year period, there's about 63% of alumni who enter 3 to 5 years out. So it's perfectly fine to wait. And there's different types of programs that you might be interested in. Say you were majoring in a certain area and then you decided, no, this is not really my area of study. We've worked with students who decided they wanted to go to med school, but they had not studied the sciences, right? So they went to a post-bac program that was specifically focused on um, working in the sciences and then going into further graduate education. There's also master's degree programs, and you can do a thesis program or a non-thesis program. Other, I guess, more focused training programs, or you can call it technical training programs, more like in business, like a master's in business administration or a master's in public health or nursing, master's in public administration. And then there's the professional school route, which is much more law, medicine, dentistry, veterinarian school, engineering, and even seminary. And for those, you would definitely want to talk to the pre-professional advisors here on campus. And we can talk more about who those people are. And then there are PhD programs, and those are doctorate level programs. They tend to be programs that last longer, take longer to complete. So we want to kind of review some of these and talk to you about how you can make decisions around this. The program types, you can go to a full-time traditional student model. So there are programs that you can go in and you can do full-time graduate program study and get all the way through it. But if you're a working professional, which many of our graduates go into grad school and they also have a full-time job, they're the part-time geared towards working professionals. And if you have any questions, just put them in the chat. And my colleagues, you all jump right in whenever you want to. But first of all, making the decision whether or not to go to graduate school. And I'll be perfectly honest, I have talked to students in career services who come to me saying that they have to go to graduate school upon graduating because they need to go straight in. They can't afford to not go straight in. And there's some real questions that you need to ask yourself. You have to be very honest and first of all say, do you have a clear focus on what you want to study? A graduate program or professional school program is not going to accept you just because you willy-nilly wander in and say, this is a wonderful program, I think I want to study in it. That doesn't work. You have to really be able to articulate and convince them that you are prepared and you are ready to come in and provide something to their program. Also, research interests, especially if you're going into a PhD program, you have to have clear, focused research interests. Also, in addition, are you academically qualified? Do you have the required GPA, the required area of study? Are you a strong student who has demonstrated that you're ready to go into graduate work? So these are all kinds of things to consider. What degree is needed for the job I want? A lot of students say, well, if I want a job in this area, I'm going to have to get a graduate degree. And sometimes students think that, but there are lots of opportunities to get a job in a field and not have a graduate degree, okay, to advance. So that takes a little bit of like researching, on your part. So look at the programs. Will it help me get a better job or advance my career? Maybe in a few years, it might help me advance my career, but will it help me advance my career immediately? Maybe there's an earning potential. A lot of times graduates will graduate from Austin College, go into employment, and then discover that maybe if they had a graduate degree, an MBA or some other degree, their earning potential might be greater, but you might not know that exactly right now. And then what fits your own interests and academic background? Don't forget yourself, okay? Just because you finished your studies here at Austin College does not mean that you have to go directly into graduate school. Also, can you afford it? Can you afford graduate education? What's the best route to go? Hopefully, if you're a really great student and depending on the programs that you apply to, there may be programs who pay for you to come to their programs. That's ideal, okay? And then how will my decision affect significant others in my life? This is something Mindy and I were just talking about before we started. Like, you have to consider other people in your life. Taking on graduate school, professional school debt is going to not only affect you, but it's going to affect your family. And if there are others in your immediate significant other circle, you need to consider them. And, a lot of students say, oh God, I haven't even thought that far. right? Well, at some point, you will be thinking about that. How is now the right timing to pursue the degree? And again, we'll talk about that further. But the school and the program matter. Making the choice can be difficult. I, for one, waited 3.5 years before I went to graduate school. I couldn't have gotten into graduate school probably after Austin College simply because I didn't have the focus and I didn't have the GPA. You all are much smarter than I was at that time. So, all of these things really, really matter. And this is what this program is for. We want you to make all these considerations before you decide. The other thing that I hear a lot from students is their parents. We've got parents on our shoulders whispering things or yelling things in our ears about what we should do. And they haven't necessarily been educated on these things, right? And so it's very important that you understand what it takes and then you talk to them about the things that you're doing in your decision making. Okay, other questions to ask yourself. For some fields, going to graduate school is required. Okay, so if you are professional school, obviously if you want to be a doctor, you need to go to a osteopathic medicine program or a medical program, right? Can you take a gap year or two before doing that? Certainly you can. It's very, very common for students to do that. Social services, like to go into a social work field. You can do some things at a bachelor's level, but a lot of those programs or jobs require a master's degree. Higher education administration, same thing. Healthcare, public health. Engineering, you're going to absolutely need to go into a graduate program. Is this chosen career field one that I'm truly serious about? That's another thing. I'm like I use the term willy-nilly. It's probably not the best term, but you really have to put a lot of thought and consideration into further study. Don't let it just be a knee jerk. I'm graduating, I go straight into graduate school. That's the easiest thing to do. That's not always the smartest thing to do. Ask yourself, am I ready? Do I need some time? Do I need some time maybe to really clarify my focus? This has been a very difficult time for us over the past year. And, some students might think the job market is horrible, and which it's not actually. And you want to do kind of like something that's going to like help you prepare better for the job market. Let's step back and stop for a second and think about those things. Am I resilient? Can I persist? Can I get through? Okay. Think about how your experience has been at the undergraduate level. And, sometimes it's been very, very difficult and you might just need some time to take a break. I don't think your loans come due until about 6 months after your graduation. So it gives you a little bit of time, but once you get into graduate school, those are deferred again. Okay. Also think about when you're looking at your job, how much autonomy do I want? Do I want to be at the top? Do I want to be that person who has the degree and the leadership that's going to lead others? And is this degree going to help me be able to accomplish that? And then what are your long-term goals? And then what are the advantages? Sometimes the graduate degree is going to open doors. I put there maybe. It will set me apart from others with only a bachelor's degree level. It shows that I'm driven, I've acquired advanced skills. It might keep me marketable. It'll help connect me with other professionals in the field, and it might even help me make career changes in my future. Okay, but there's always that but, right? Right after your BA may not be helpful for all occupations. So if you're thinking, I've been studying business administration or business finance, and I want to go directly into an MBA, well, some grad programs require years of experience to be, ready to get into, that degree program. MBAs especially, I think probably 27 to 29 is the average age of an MBA candidate. A lot of those schools are looking for experience at the undergraduate level, and a lot of those candidates are students who've already worked and are going in to further their career. With only the degree and no years of experience, will I be marketable? Think about that. Sometimes if you get a graduate degree and then you apply for employment, but you don't have really any experience in the field, you've got the degree, but no real practical experience, employers might look and say, I don't have enough money. We can't pay this person enough for their credential. And so you need to think about that as well. Will my earning potential really be greater out of the gate? I think a lot of times people think that, but that may not be the case. Also, graduate school is expensive. Professional school is expensive. When I talk to students who tell me they definitely want to go into law school, they definitely want to go to medical school, I ask them, have you researched how much medical school costs? And for the most part, I hear no, like I kind of have an idea. I have a daughter who's married to a doctor who graduated several years ago, and he's a physician, and they're still paying off medical school, and they have got 2 children. There's realities to this. And so you have to be really certain that this is something that you are completely devoted and motivated to do. Did you know that the vast majority of America's college debt crisis is graduate professional school debt? Not everybody knows that. They think undergraduate. How long will it take me to pay it off? And are there jobs for people with graduate degrees right now? And you have to consider COVID, pre-COVID, COVID, post-COVID. I will tell you that what we're hearing on the national level is that, job growth is really great. I mean, it's returning. So don't just think that getting a graduate degree is going to help you get that job. COVID-19 changed everything. Oh my gosh. Oh, wait. Here's a question from Andrew. Yeah, do MBA programs require a GRE? Most MBA programs require what's called a GMAT test, which is a graduate management. It's through the Graduate Management Associate.
Administration.
Do what? Go ahead.
The administration, yeah.
Yes. It's GMAC is where you, GMAC I think org that you would go to, but some graduate schools in MBA will accept the GRE too. So it's kind of, it just depends on the program.
Yeah. And the GRE is mostly for economics.
Okay. Thank you, Mickey.
Thank y'all.
Okay. So think about this, whether you're saying now or later, delaying graduate school can help you gain experience and focus. It can make you more competitive for a great graduate program if you can't find a job in the field. In my situation, staying in my first position for 2.5 years really helped me explore options. It helped me really assess myself. It helped me determine what my focus was. And if I really wanted to go a certain route, did I need to get a graduate degree? And I determined, yes, I needed to get a counseling degree, a master's degree, if I really wanted to do what I wanted to do. And so sometimes waiting is going to really help you decide that. And that's perfectly fine. If you really want the degree, you will find a way to obtain it. Okay. It's not impossible. Also, working for a few years can help you save up for some graduate school tuition. Here's the caveat, unless, of course, you are awarded a scholarship. And there are many programs, and I'm going to invite my colleagues in here to talk about what those programs are that could award you a full tuition to go into a graduate program.
We can jump in, and
Okay.
yeah, in general, I would recommend that students not consider a graduate program unless they are getting some tuition waiver, right? Oftentimes this is in return for some teaching responsibilities or TA responsibilities. One thing you have to remember is even if they are waiving all of your tuition and fees, you still have to pay rent and eat, right? So it does not mean getting a full ride on tuition does not, and even possibly drawing a small salary or stipend. I can tell you that for most grad students in the humanities, that stipend is well below poverty level. You will not be able to survive on it. And you will, and it did for me and for many of my colleagues, involve taking on still a massive amount of debt, even though we paid no tuition, right? Because in the humanities, in many fields, a grad degree, if it's a master's degree, maybe you're in and out within a year to 3 years, depending. Professional schools vary, obviously. PhD, it's at minimum a 5-year commitment. Many people take 10. So take however much money you're going to have to borrow to survive and multiply it by 5, 8, or 10. And you will see that the debt you take on can still be significant.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to talk a little bit about the sciences, which is the fields that I'm from. And it's a bit of a happier story than the humanities. So in the sciences, it's really common for both you to get tuition remission. You should absolutely never take an offer in the sciences where it does not include free tuition. And the stipends in the sciences are often, I'm not going to call them like you're going to live large, but are a living wage. The students in my department in the last few years have gotten stipends coming out into PhD programs of in the high 20s is kind of where those are sitting right now. So again, you're not going to be, rolling in money, but it's enough generally to live on. I will say that one of the things to think about sometimes with those graduate stipends, though, is the cost of living in different places. So I had a student, one of my last students that's gone to graduate school out of my lab, he was making a choice between the University of Washington in Seattle and the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis. And he chose, the stipends were roughly the same, and he chose Minnesota because he could afford to live in his own apartment and he wouldn't have to have a roommate. So high cost of living cities are something that can really eat into those graduate stipends. And I think the last thing I'll say about the sciences is that in the hard sciences, I would say field biology is a little bit more of an exception to this from what I've seen, but definitely in the biomedical sciences and chemistry and in physics, the more common thing to do is to enter PhD programs. Most of those students, master's degrees are sometimes what students get when they decide to leave a PhD program without finishing, but it's not something that very many students aim to necessarily get from the beginning. It's still a very useful degree on the job market. It opens you up for a lot of jobs in industry, but it's generally something that people, it's not what you enter graduate school to do. Part of that is about funding. You're going to get much more funding as a PhD student than an MA student, like Mindy's saying in the chat, and that's probably true regardless of field. The last thing that I would want to say about this is when I look at the class of students that I started graduate school with, and this was a long time ago, but I don't think that this point is necessarily changed when I see the way our students have gone off to graduate school during my career at Austin College, is that knowing why you want to be in a PhD program and get a doctorate is really important. In a lot of ways, getting into a PhD program, and particularly in the sciences, is like easier than finding a job in a lot of ways. It's a very straightforward path. You apply, you take the JRE. It's a lot like applying for college. And there's not a lot of hassle in doing it. I don't think it doesn't seem as scary because there's a clear path laid out. But if you don't know why you want to be there and that you want a job in the future that really requires you to have that kind of a degree, a PhD, it's really hard to stay motivated because it's a lot of work and it's a lot of very independent work. So even though it's a really clear path to get there, there's not a clear path out. There's a lot of figuring it out on your own and figuring out how to make your research work. And so it takes a lot of persistence once you get there to figure it out. And if you're not really committed to yes, this is absolutely what I want to do and when requires a PhD, those were a lot of the students who left our program with master's degrees because they decided that they didn't want a PhD, that they were much happier doing the kind of work that they could do with a master's degree. I knew I really wanted to be a college professor when I went to graduate school because I loved being a TA when I was an undergraduate. And there were many days when I couldn't get experiments to work where that was what could keep me there and in the lab because I knew that end goal was out there.
Yeah, and just to add on the funding, so for the social sciences, particularly for economics, we fall in between the hard sciences and the humanities in terms of funding. Generally, there's a new trend that usually if the school is not very certain about your potential, they may not give you funding the very first semester or the very first year. They can bring you in and then kind of test to see how you do, and then subsequently, they'll give you the funding. So it's a risk that you can take in some cases, but generally the funding comes, but it's not as generous as the sciences, but not too maybe too low compared to the humanities. So I think we're sort of in between with some nuances attached to it. Yeah.
And you might decide to take a position with an employer who has benefits, and in that benefit package, they will pay for a certain percentage of your graduate studies. If you get into a company and you talk about wanting to persist in that company and wanting to advance in that company, they may pay for the entire thing. It really depends. So looking at benefit packages of employers is really important as well. I've talked with several of our students who are graduates, who have been working full time, and their employer has said, we'll pay 60% of your graduate education, and they've jumped on it. So yeah, it's a wonderful benefit. So when you look at benefit packages for your employer that you're going to work for, check that off as a really, really great benefit to have. I always like to ask students, what do you want? Like, what do you daydream about? And I know that that's kind of like really kind of silly to some people, but you know, we all have these ideas of where we want to be in our lives. What do you anticipate your life looking like? If I can tell you, if you anticipate your life looking like your parents right now as a new graduate, it's probably not going to happen. That takes several years. So think about that. Um, will you be able to go back to school later? That's another thing that I hear a lot from students. If I don't go straight into graduate school, then I won't go. And I'm here to tell you that if you really want to go and you are committed to doing it, you will find a way to make that happen. I had one child when I started graduate school and was pregnant with my second child before I even finished my degree. And it's possible. So, you know, it will work if that's something that you are truly, truly committed to. So don't let that dissuade you. And then where you get the degree does matter. Can you get into the right school now? And I'm going to let my colleagues talk about, you know, the top tier, you know, I guess the middle tier, and then the safe tier schools. Schools are expensive to apply to, and you have to be realistic about what type of school you can get into. Oh yeah. Oh, before, did you know that the average age of a graduate student in the US is 33 years of age? Think about it. That's 11 years after you've gotten out of your your undergraduate.
So this slide is useful, Margie, because the best way to research where to go in the field that you desire to study in is, of course, to talk to people who know that field, right? And so this is where your professors who are in the field, other grad students who are already in the programs that you're interested in, you can ask as you start to talk to folks at that school if they can connect you with grad students who are currently in the programs you're interested in. And that's like feet on the ground intelligence, right? That's like the best account you're actually going to get of the kinds of courses, the kinds of professors, the kinds of mentoring, the resources that actually exist, right, in actuality at the school. So talking to people who are in the jobs that you want to do, who are in the programs you're interested in applying to, and your professors who are in those fields, because, you know, field by field, the sort of top schools may not be the ones you have even heard of or are expecting.
Yeah, and what I want to add on, to that mentioned by Mindy is sometimes the ranking can also be misleading. Certain programs are known for certain things, so they may not be a top rank institution in general, but for some specific areas, they are known for that. So it's important for students to be aware of what they really want to do and then figure out the school that is suitable for that. I think if we can do that, it really can kind of reduce a lot of stress in terms of kind of figure out, which is the top rank and mid tier, and then the safety. And also, faculty, as Mindy mentioned, usually we are in this field, so sometimes things are hyper specialized today. I mean, nowadays every field is getting even more specialized. So with all this specialization taking place, it's important to speak with people who are in the field. Otherwise, if you just go about generally, you will not get the information you need to make the right decision. So I always tell my students who are looking into grad school that the best we can do is to minimize the information asymmetry. Like the more you can reduce those information asymmetry, the better decisions you can make. So speaking with faculty, of course, I also try to connect them with students that I know that have already been there, but I'm not always successful. But if they know somebody or know somebody who knows somebody, I can connect them. So that engagement in terms of people in the field, your faculty, your friends, grad students in the institution that you're looking into, all of them are necessary to really help you make informed decision. This is where I would say there's no information overload, frankly. The more you know, the better.
So I really want to reiterate what both Mindy and Mickey said about talking to faculty and talking to people who know the things. I think it's really important. And like, I think that there is no conversation that a professor would like to have more with a student than to talk about graduate school in their field. Like, we love to talk about that. One of the things that I want to talk about, that I've got a few things I was making notes as Mindy and Mickey were talking about. One of the things that I think is important when you think about those rankings and prestige is that they're different for graduate schools and different for graduate schools in different disciplines than they are at the undergrad level. I had a student a few years ago who was like obsessed. I'd given him a list of like schools he should think about for applying for graduate school in my field. And I had Duke on the list. And he was like blown away because he has these ideas about how Duke is hard to get into as an undergraduate and super prestigious. It's a mid-tier chemistry program. It's great. It's a perfectly good school, but it's not at the very tippy top in the way that you might think about it as an undergraduate institution. So those are different things. The other thing that I think that prestige to think about is that it really matters more and less depending on what you want to do after you get your PhD. So, in my field, if you want to work in industry afterwards, you want to go work for a pharmaceutical company or somebody who makes paint or polymers or whatever, it matters a lot less, that prestige factor. If you want to become an academic, it matters a lot more. And so what you want to do afterwards depends on what it is that you want to do afterwards with your degree. One of the things that I see students in my field get distracted by when they're making those decisions is they'll get super excited. And of course, schools are marketing to you about this, about all their fancy facilities and all their cool equipment and how many fancy toys they have. And that's not the important part. Every graduate school is going to have fancy things like that. Like, they're a research institution. That's what they do. It's way more important to pay attention to people and relationships and what the social conditions in the department are than exactly what fancy toys they have. Making sure that it's a place where graduate students feel supported, where there's not a toxic environment. Those things are a lot more important than what kind of fancy facilities they have. And finally, I think that ultimate, relationship, different fields have sort of different levels of tightness between graduate students and their PhD advisors. In the sciences, that's a really tight relationship because that's the person whose lab you're working in and your research is their research. You guys are collaborators. It's a very tight relationship. And so that relationship is incredibly important and formative. And one of the things I tell my students going to graduate school is like, there is no decision that is going to be more important in your life other than who you marry, than who it is that you have for your PhD advisor. And it's a relationship that follows you for the rest of your career. I will always be a Joel Harris student as a chemist, and he's still somebody who I keep in contact with. And, for a long time, I'm not doing chemistry anymore, but when I was still in the lab was still somebody who would send things that would interest me my way and watch out for me. And that just is a really, really important relationship.
And you do need to do your homework on this, and I think Carla will agree, which means you should talk to their students. You need to find out what the scuttlebutt is on that person. And ideally, you're going to go out and visit the school and meet with that person and spend some serious time with them. Ask hard questions, right? One of the reasons I actually turned down the University of Chicago, which is a top 10 ranked history program, in order to go to the University of Kansas, which is a top 25 ranked history program, is because I went to Kansas and I met the advisor, and he spent 3 days taking me around on their spring break. And I understood that if I had that advisor, he was going to be incredibly hands-on and supportive of my research. The people at the University of Chicago wouldn't give me that kind of time. It made all the difference in my decision. And it was the right decision, right? So having that advisor relationship right is really crucial. Totally agree with what Carla said.
We have a question from Brett. He asked, what makes graduate programs good or bad? What differs between the high tier programs and the mid to low tier programs?
It depends on the field. In the places where grant funding is a thing, and this is true not just in the hard sciences, but for a good amount of the social sciences as well, a lot of it is based on research funding. It's based on how much funding those departments are able to attract, which is related to how many publications they have and in how higher tier journals they're publishing. But a lot of it is really tied in the sciences to the amount of research funding and research grants their faculty are able to get.
Yeah, and pre-COVID, it used to be also, you can tell which one is top tier based on the requirements for admission. Some of them are very, very strict and very, very, high in terms of, their demands. And then the bottom tier typically would waive a whole lot of requirements for you to get in. Now, with COVID and perhaps, post-COVID, many institutions, whether top rank or bottom ranked, still do not require you to send everything in. So the requirements, might not necessarily give you a signal, but in the past, that used to be a very, very good signal that if they want me to have a high, GMAT score or GRE score, if they want me to do X, Y, Z, but then another school is saying, just come on in, we don't need all of that. So that's one way you can gauge if, it's a top tier or bottom tier or mid tier.
In the humanities, a good metric is placement of their alums. How many of them finish the PhD versus starting the PhD, winning prestigious fellowships? How well do they perform in terms of being competitive for those things, for publishing, right? And I think also just visibility within the given field. If the scholars at that institution are engaged and recognized and known in the fields, that their graduates also reap those benefits.
I want to expand on, talking to people in the fields. We have so many wonderful alumni who are just waiting to visit with you about whatever questions, whatever advice you're seeking. And, that's one of our jobs in career services is to maintain those close connections with alumni, but your faculty also have some pretty close connections with alumni who've graduated from their programs. So if you've got questions about different schools and programs and, where the outcomes of the graduates and you want to get those answers, we can help you connect with those people. And so please ask. Networking is so important if you're thinking about going to graduate school as it is going into employment. We all need a network. We all need each other. And at one point, you're going to be in a situation where you're going to be able to do the same thing for other people. So don't discount that. When you're looking at, admissions requirements, also really do a clear, look at your past experience. First of all, the entrance exams and are those, which ones are required? Sometimes now in the times of COVID, I hate saying that, but they have waived some of those. But also, are they looking at work and internship experience and research? And if you're really lacking in those areas, then you need to really consider that. Think about, how many schools you want to apply to. And, it's a big consideration because application fees are expensive. In many cases, they can be up to like $125 a piece. And if you're, applying to 8 schools, that's that's a chunk of money. So think about that. Also, what to expect from the interview process. Some schools will absolutely give you an interview option, and then there's others that don't. But quite frankly, I would ask for an opportunity to interview, to come to campus, to visit, to meet with faculty, if they don't have already a structured interview process in place.
The other thing I want to say when we talk about that admissions requirement thing, Margie,
Mm-hmm.
another really important thing when you're applying to master's and graduate programs, not the, I mean, it's important for the professional school one sometimes too, are letters of recommendation.
Yeah, I think we're getting to that on the next slide.
Getting ahead of you, sorry.
No, that's okay. Or maybe, no, go back. I think, there we go. I think talking with your professors or professional school advisors about your ideas. Yeah, because you're going to need recommendations. There you go, Carla. And your faculty are the ones who are going to write the best recommendations for you, right? So I'm sorry. Go ahead, Carla.
Those recommendations are really important, and it's particularly important to have them for people that have worked with you on research, undergraduate research, or big projects in class that have research components to them, because those are the kinds of things that graduate schools want us to be able to comment on. And I sometimes have students who will ask me for letters of recommendation for graduate school in areas that aren't my expertise. And you really want to ask faculty that are people who are in the field where you're going to go, or closely related fields. Like, I felt comfortable writing letters for students to go to graduate school in physics before, for example, but I don't feel good writing a letter for a student who's applied for graduate school in like counseling psychology. So they really care about not just the quality of those relationships with your faculty, but what the faculty expertise is, because they want people who know what the graduate school is like to be able to do some of that vetting and tell them if the person's a good match.
Yeah, and I just want to add that don't just ask any faculty to write the letter for you. Ask somebody who really knows you. Being on this side, sometimes when I'm reviewing some of these application letters on the admin committees, it's clear that the faculty doesn't know the student very well, and that's just not a good signal. So don't just ask anybody. Ask somebody who really knows you, that they can write something much more tangible than general statements. So I think you can get a lot out of telling somebody who really knows you to write a letter than just anybody.
And I would go so far even to say, Mickey, in support of what you're saying, that like if you have a faculty member or a mentor who you're particularly close with, talk to that person about strategizing who your other letters should come from. It's something that we do with our students in my department.
Yeah, I agree.
So finally, like final thoughts, do your research. Obviously know the types of programs that are offered in your discipline. Not all graduate programs are created equal. I mean, we should all know that, right? I mean, that's a basic for everything. Think in terms of your life's work. What do you want your life to be like? Where do you see yourself? I use career and life's work interchangeably all the time, because our career involves so many things. So think about your personal life, your relationships, your future, your entire family. There's nothing wrong with thinking about that right now. Understand and ask questions about costs. Very, very important. Although I don't know anybody who doesn't have any debt, right? But the least amount of debt that you can have, the better. And the timing for attendance. And then also use your resources wisely. Don't just go willy-nilly applying to all kinds of places and spending your money if you're not certain. And there's so many people here at Austin College who are just sitting here waiting, willing to have you come and sit and talk to them about this. I know there's a lot of students who have come to Austin College who had no one to talk to about college in the first place, right? And they definitely don't have anybody to talk to about graduate school. And we we are here to help you figure all that out. No question is silly. You know, I mean, questions. That's the best thing to be doing right now. And anything else you all want to add?
Well, and the sooner the better. This should be an ongoing conversation, right?
Yes.
That you grow over time. Like the worst thing you could do is, the application deadline is December 1, and you show up in my office and we want to talk about it for the first time in November. You're 2 months too late already, Start the conversation now, do the research over a period of months, because these statements are not written overnight. I mean, this process takes time, right?
Mhm,
And your
mhm.
impressions may evolve.
Right.
And so the sooner that you can get it rolling by networking and having, sitting down and having the conversation, the better.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, no, we invite first year students to come to Graduate Professional School Day to start having those conversations with representatives about what they look for in candidates. What makes you a strong candidate. Um, it's good to prepare. The more questions that you can ask, the better. I think if you are sitting back and silent and hoping that things are going to come to you, it's not going to happen. But we are definitely here to help you. And we're not scary people.
Well, and to survive grad school, you have to be a self-starter. So consider this your first lesson in how to survive it.
Exactly. Exactly. Anybody else have any other questions? I'm looking in the chat. I think that Mindy's added all kinds of things. And
Sorry.
no, it's great. But talking about personal statement and application process and all that, that's like whole nother workshop. And we're happy to visit with you about all of that. I've spent a lot of time this semester working with students on understanding the whole application, answering questions about the applications, kind of nitpicking, picking it apart. And your faculty are there to help you do that as well. Like we're your greatest allies. Anything else that we can cover? I do want to add before we leave, for those of you who are still on, there are some gateways programs that Austin College has that are specialized agreements with certain colleges and universities that you can learn more about. And you can go to that by going to the academic tab at the Austin College website and going to graduate school, and then going to Gateways programs. And if you need more information, please feel free to ask me, and I can point you to the correct faculty to talk to about those programs. In addition, Austin College does have 3 programs right now with Texas Tech University that you can apply to, and in some cases take some courses at the graduate level that would count towards your undergraduate level courses. And so if you need more information about those, please come and ask me, and I'll tell you more about those as well. Good luck, everybody. And you know where to find us. I'm on Zoom, but you can stop by my office at Wright Center 263, second floor, right by the Student Life office. In the fall, I am going to meet you in person. I'm fully vaccinated and I'll wear a mask if I need to, but by all means, I am going to meet you in person because that's what I have to do. Andrew says, thank you. Okay.
Guys.
Bye. Thank you all so much for participating, and I'll share the recording.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is great. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Mickey.
Yeah, good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night.
All right.